qualities that people have spoken about already, served him well from day one. Well-established scholars respected how effortlessly and energetic he engaged with their own work. First-time authors and up-and-comers gravitated to him as a mentor. On this front, it wasn't just his intellect that authors appreciated, it was who he was as a human being. Greg was unfailingly generous and kind in his role as series editor. It's very hard to be able to tell people no. No, this particular project doesn't work. No, it's not quite ready for me to pitch to the press. Greg handled those conversations as deftly and graciously and kindly as anyone I've ever worked with. Having the utmost faith in his judgment made me take even more seriously the projects that he wanted to go to bat for. And those projects were so much fun. Greg was like a kid in a candy shop when he wanted to talk about a project he loved or a book idea that was percolating. His was a phone call I always took because it was energizing and exciting to hear him talk about his work. On the phone, you could feel him reverberating on the other end. For me, a conversation with him was sort of like a shot of intellectual or creative adrenaline, and it gave me momentum. By 2012, Greg was serving as a series editor for 2 series at Routledge. He was simultaneously serving as a faculty advisor for SUNY University Press. That is an extraordinary sphere of influence for one person to have within a very defined area of academic publishing, particularly for someone as young as Greg. But he was so modest about his accomplishments and generous with his time, you'd almost never know it. 15 years is a very long time to have someone as your constant go-to, so it's of course very difficult to do without. Greg's own body of work and the books he signed within his series and authored himself will stand as a legacy to his intellectual work for many years to come. It is the infectious enthusiasm and energy that can be much harder to rally and remember. Greg regularly reminded me what great privilege and joy there is in the work that we do, and it's there that I would like to encourage us all to remember, embrace, and foster as we pay tribute forward to an exemplary man and scholar.
Our next speaker will be Cameron.
Good afternoon. I'm Cameron McCarthy. I want to say that I shared several affinities with Greg, but his facility with two-pack exceeded any competence that I could have. I really wish to acknowledge Greg's family, members who are here, to convey my deepest and sincerest sympathies to Michelle, his wife, and Christina, and is it Iris? Who were with us, and we with them in this celebration of Greg's life and work. It is fitting that we remember the giver of intellectual labor when life in the body is spent. Always remembering that behind the books and the articles and the conferences and the appearances, and I mean the appearances, the tools and artifacts of labor is a sentient, sensitive subject. A human being with history, with biography, with family, and a network of feeling and association. And so I remember Greg as one of the most unassuming, caring, loving, and committed persons, always ready to collaborate, always ready to work with others, always aware of what might make life better for others in the sometimes hostile educational spaces that we inhabit. I still remember him and our many points of affiliation, me, a child of poverty in the perimeter of the South, in Barbados, and Greg, Greek American, but they found affinity on many things. He came to the University of Illinois 2 years after I did. I actually may be wrong, but that I do not work with precision. I was a postdoc in speech God, working with one of Stuart Hall's American disciples, Larry Grossberg, when Greg joined us. How he found himself over to me, an educational policy studies department, is not clear in my mind at all. Greg had the intense inquisitiveness of an adolescent in search of new intellectual experiences, fully commensurate with my own equally adolescent desire to put new stuff into generic courses that I was then seeking to capture. It was an extraordinary confluence of opportunity and shared intellectual feeling, and the beginning of several meaningful collaborations. I remember most our shared interest and affection for the great African-American writer, James Baldwin, who had saved me from the excesses of a classical colonial education and had affected Greg's orientation to the world with a moral and ethical investment that Baldwin insisted must be infused in writing and action. I remember as well Greg's buoyant humor, which suffused many of the book projects and articles we worked on together in our student faculty writing and publishing collectives. I was Greg's co-advisor, but from the first I recognized him as a collaborator and an equal investment in intellectual endeavor. I remember when we were working on the Foucault and Cultural Studies book, Greg's warning some of us of over-abstraction, insisting that we should not try to out-Foucault Foucault, that we had to search for our own original research projects and interventions without the signatures of that great Frenchman. This gentle reminder placed a useful check on what was then a growing downhill of Foucauldian thought, written by ambitious aspirants to the next wave. Nadine, I'm sticking to my 8 minutes. I remember Greg now, as my daughters, Rhiannon and Eileen, whom he babysat at times, remember him as a friend and caring and loving interlocutor. And I remember too that line of the Guyanese poet, Martin Carter, which still moves me today, written for those fallen in the struggle for change and a meaningful life. And death will not find us thinking that he died. May Greg's soul rest in peace. Thank you.
Next speaker, Lingard and
hello, I'm Bob Lingard. It's a privilege and great honour to speak here today at this memorial for Greg Dimitriadis. But like all of us, I do so in great sadness at the loss we've all suffered. I've spoken at 2 memorial services in my life, one for my dad and one for my colleague, Carolyn Baker. And what I came to realise at both occasions was how inarticulate the heart can be at such times. Today is no different. Perhaps art and literature are the real literacies of the heart, a reality I know Greg would have accepted. This reality, I think, was manifested in much of his writing, and I'm thinking of his book with Cameron, Reading and Teaching the Post-Colonial. I also note that the image on the cover was a reproduction of a work by the Australian Indigenous artist, Gordon Bennett, also a good friend of mine who also passed away quite recently. Art and literature, as the literacies of the heart, are also very evident in the article with Michelle that we have just published in our journal, Discourse. The article, Travelling Homes, Contemporary Korean Art After the Post-Colonial. I love the idea of the post-colonial. I wonder where we go after that. Of course, we published this article with mixed emotions. Joy at the quality of it, and that it was co-authored by Michelle and Greg, but great sadness that it was published after Greg's passing. Commenting on Michelle and Greg's article brings me inevitably perhaps to Discourse, the journal that I've edited for a long time, and I edited for a long time with my friend Fazal. It was the 2 of us that changed the subtitle of the journal to the Studies in the Cultural Politics of Education, and we were drawing on the work and insights of the great Caribbean British cultural theorist Stuart Hall. Our last number of Discourse was a special number on Stuart Hall, and a conceptualisation of his work as public pedagogy. An obituary for Greg appeared in that special number written by Fazal and Cameron, and that seemed very appropriate to us that it was in a Stuart Hall special number, given Greg's intellectual interest and academic disposition. And I think that disposition was most clear in Greg's last book, the 2012 book, Critical Dispositions, published by Routledge. And I know the day that Fazal told me that Greg had died, I told Catherine Bernard, who spoke previously and who commissioned that book, and I know that she was as devastated as Carolyn and I were when that news came to us. I wanted to stress really what a wonderful friend Greg was to our journal. He saw it as his intellectual home. He published widely in it, refereed numerous papers for it, especially when we needed a reviewer urgently or someone had let us down. He was a member of the editorial board. It was very difficult to take his name off the inside cover, which we did just recently. So it's fitting, yet extremely sad, that his last publication in Discourse is in Discourse co-authored with Michelle. But our view of the article, Travelling Homes, is that it exemplifies exactly what Fazal and I were trying to grasp when we gave it the subtitle, Studies in the Cultural Politics of Education. With Greg's passing, a small part of Discourse has died too. Life is, to some extent, I think, unfathomable, and Greg's passing confirms that. Yet we must all try to live ethically and morally and seek to make the world a better place, more socially just, more democratic. And we can do that through big politics or small politics of the quotidian. I think Greg's life exemplified that. Live quietly, but with decency, morality, goodness, deeply committed to a more socially just world. So I want to conclude with the last lines of Joni Mitchell's song, Both Sides Now, which seems to recollect and grasp the phases of our lives, but express at the same time the unfathomability and mystery of it all. And when I read these words, I'm thinking of a very late rendition that she did of this song, which had Wayne Shorter on saxophone and Herbie Hancock on piano, because I think that hybrid combination and that version of the song, that rendition, would have appealed to Greg. I always remember when he came and stayed with us in our house in Brisbane a couple of years ago, and he came through the door and there was Charles Lloyd playing music. And he says, "Ah, that's Charles Lloyd." And then he looked, and we've got a few Gordon Bennett paintings here and there, and he immediately went to the Gordon Bennett paintings. And I thought to myself that Cameron talked about affiliations. I thought that connections work across nations, cultures, and generations. But to both sides now. Tears and fears and feeling proud to say I loved you right out loud. Well, something's lost, but something's gained in living every day. I've looked at life from both sides now, from win and lose, and still somehow it's life's illusions I recall. I really don't know life at all. Thanks, Greg. Your passing has left a hole in our universe, but it and all of us are better for having known you and having had your calm, intelligent, dignified, and decent presence in this world. Thank you.